forest always whispered before dawn. Its breath rose in gentle mist, curling around roots and low branches, as though the earth itself exhaled after a long night of dreaming. The canopy was heavy with dew, and in the pale blue stillness every drop seemed like a suspended star. Oz. If you closed your eyes here, you could hear the slow rhythm of nature's heart. The distant hoot of an owl fading into silence. The careful crunch of unseen creatures retreating to their burrows. The faint sigh of leaves stirred by the softest wind. It was here, at the edge of waking and forgetting, that Finn's story began again, not with a sword raised high, but with something quietly missing. When Finn lost his arm, the world seemed to hush. The boy, who had once believed himself whole, found himself staring at an emptiness where once there had been strength, adventure, and laughter. But the forest was not cruel. Instead, it offered him silence, the kind of silence that does not punish but reflects like a still pond. In the hush of the dawn, he could feel the phantom weight of what had been taken, and he began to wonder, what do we truly lose when part of us is gone? Is it merely flesh and bone, or is it also a dream, a rhythm, a piece of one's destiny? The trees seemed to answer, though not in words. Their trunks reached upward, their branches interlaced, as if holding hands against the sky. They had lost leaves countless times, entire seasons stripped away, yet still they stood, still they grew. In this, Finn saw something both tender and difficult. Loss was not the end, but a transformation. Could it be that the absence of his arm was not a wound alone, but also a passage? Was the emptiness not only hollow but also spacious, a place where something new might take root? As he wandered deeper, moss softened each step, and the air smelled of pine and distant rain. He touched the rough bark with his remaining hand, tracing the grooves like a map. He realized he had been given a chance to notice textures, weights, and balances he had once ignored. The act of holding something, even a simple twig, felt different now. Was this awareness a gift, or merely a cruel reminder? His mind swayed between the two, like branches caught between calm and storm. In that swaying he discovered the quiet truth. Loss is never singular. It ripples, changing everything it touches. There is an old question whispered in many myths. Do we belong more to what we have, or to what we have lost? Finn felt both answers pressing upon him. His arm had been part of his battles, his laughter, his sense of invincibility. Yet, in losing it, he was forced to meet himself anew, not as a warrior unbroken, but as a soul learning to walk alongside imperfection. Oz. He thought of knights in old tales who bore scars like medals. Yet he wondered if the truest scar was not on the skin, but on the heart, where no one else could see it. Was this scar, invisible and unspoken, the one that truly shaped who we became? The forest shifted as sunlight began to filter in, breaking into golden threads. Each ray fell like a gentle hand upon the earth, blessing even the darkest corners. Finn watched the light bend around leaves, and he realized light does not avoid shadow. It enters it. Perhaps his own shadow, the emptiness of his arm, was not meant to be hidden but touched by the light of acceptance. Perhaps wholeness was not about restoring what was gone, but about allowing the brokenness to shine in new ways. He breathed deeply, and for the first time the loss felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Birdsong began to weave into the air, soft at first, then growing into a tapestry of sound. Each note reminded Finn that life did not pause for sorrow. It continued, unceasing, calling even those who grieved to listen. He sat beneath a tree and closed his eyes, feeling the ground support him. He was not alone. He was part of a rhythm far larger than himself, a rhythm that included both growth and decay, fullness and absence, joy and mourning. To lose an arm was to step into that eternal cycle, not outside of it. And so, in the forest of beginnings, Finn realized he had entered a different kind of adventure. No longer a quest to conquer monsters or explore distant lands, but a journey inward where the fiercest battles were fought in silence and the gentlest victories were invisible. Pause. The forest had welcomed him not as a hero with a sword, but as a soul learning to be whole within its own incompleteness. The dawn deepened, and the mist began to lift. Finn rose slowly, his heart quiet but steady. He did not yet know where the path would lead, only that it had begun. And sometimes beginnings are hidden inside what feels most like an ending. In dreams, Finn still felt it. His missing arm, whole and strong, moved as though it had never been taken from him. Fingers flexed, a hand closed around a sword, muscles stretched with remembered strength. Yet when he opened his eyes, the dream dissolved, and the truth returned. Nothing but absence, an emptiness where sensation should be. Pause. This was the riddle of the phantom limb, a mystery as old as grief itself, the way the body remembers what the body has lost. The forest around him seemed to echo this paradox. Branches broken by storms still reached out in ghostly outlines, shapes of limbs that no longer existed yet were imagined by memory. He walked among them with a strange comfort. If the trees could remember their missing pieces without despair, perhaps he too could live with his. The phantom limb was both a torment and a gift. Torment because it reminded him of what he no longer had. Gift because it proved that what was gone still lingered in a language deeper than sight. What is memory, if not a phantom limb of the mind? We carry echoes of voices, faces, touches that no longer belong to the present. They move within us, shaping how we breathe, how we choose, how we dream. Perhaps Finn's phantom limb was no different from the phantom presence of a loved one long departed, or a childhood long vanished. Pause. The ache, then, was not only physical, it was existential. It was the reminder that we are always more than what we hold and less than what we long for. He wondered if this ache was teaching him something. When the hand he no longer had seemed to clench around air, he felt frustration, yet also awareness. The body insisted on remembering wholeness. Could this be a lesson? That even when broken, the soul longs toward completion, refusing to surrender to fragments. It was as if the missing arm whispered, "I am still here, if only in spirit. I am part of you, even if unseen." The phantom limb blurred the line between illusion and truth. Was the pain real if the arm was gone? Was the hand real if he could still feel it? Finn began to suspect that the answer did not matter. Reality was not only in flesh, but also in sensation, not only in what the eyes saw, but in what the heart knew. The unseen had power, and sometimes the unseen shaped us more deeply than what was visible. In this, the phantom limb became more than a bodily quirk. It became a mirror of existence. How many of us live with pieces of ourselves missing, yet still reaching out? The dream of who we once were, the hope of who we might become, the love that lingers even when its source is gone, these are all phantom limbs of the soul. They ache, yes, but they also remind us we are alive, that our longing is proof of connection. Without that ache, would we remember what mattered? The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of rain. It brushed against Finn's skin, and for a moment he swore he felt it also on the hand he no longer had. He smiled faintly at the trick of his mind, then grew quiet. Maybe it was not a trick at all. Maybe it was proof that we are never entirely severed from what we lose. The line between presence and absence is not a wall, but a veil, thin and permeable, through which sensations still pass. But to lose is not to forget. To ache is to remember. Birds circled overhead, their wings slicing the sky. He thought of flying, how a bird does not mourn the air it just left, for the air remains all around. Perhaps the arm he lost was like that air, not gone, but diffused into the space of his being, unseen yet surrounding him. If so, then his phantom limb was not emptiness, but presence in another form. He sat at the edge of a clearing, watching light spill through. The ache was still there, pulsing faintly, but now it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like a tether, a thread binding him to all he had been, all he had loved, all he had endured. He thought of warriors before him who bore scars, and of poets who carried invisible wounds. They too had phantom limbs of memory and loss, carried silently within. Perhaps this was the common inheritance of all souls, to live incomplete, yet still reaching toward the whole. The forest grew quiet again. Finn closed his eyes and allowed the ache to stay, not as an enemy, but as a companion. In that acceptance he felt strangely complete, even in incompleteness. Pause. And so he rose, carrying both presence and absence with him, stepping forward into the unknown path where longing itself became his guide. The night came softly, like ink poured gently across parchment. Stars scattered themselves above Finn as though they had been waiting for his gaze. He lay upon the cool grass, the sky stretching infinitely beyond him, and he felt the quiet gravity of memory pressing on his chest. Pause. Memory, he thought, was its own kind of weight, neither stone nor iron, but something far heavier, because it could not be lifted away. Each star reminded him of a moment from his past. Battles fought, songs sung, laughter shared with friends who had drifted far from his side. He thought of Jake's warmth, of their countless adventures, of the countless nights when the world had seemed limitless. Yet now, staring upward, he realized how fragile those moments were. They glittered brightly in recollection, but he could never hold them again. They were lights in the distance, unreachable but undeniable. The weight of memory was not only in what was cherished, but also in what was lost. He remembered failures, choices that could not be undone, times when his sword had been too slow or his heart too uncertain. These two clung to him heavy as shadow. Perhaps this was the paradox of memory. It gave both comfort and sorrow, illumination and burden. It was both the hand that soothed him to sleep and the whisper that woke him in the dark. Finn wondered, is memory a gift or a chain? If we hold too tightly to the past, do we become prisoners of it? Yet if we let go completely, do we lose the very thread that makes us who we are? The stars above seemed to ask the same question, shining with light that had traveled across centuries. By the time their brilliance reached his eyes, many of them had already died. Was memory not like that starlight, radiance from something already gone, yet still capable of illuminating the present? He felt the grass against his skin, smelled the damp earth beneath, and let the night deepen around him. The forest carried its own memories too, the scars on bark from storms, the roots twisted around ancient stones, the moss covering forgotten logs. All of it whispered of time's passage. Nothing was erased, only transformed. Perhaps, then, the weight of memory was not meant to be lifted but carried gently, like one carries a lantern through the dark. The heaviness came when we tried to deny it, when we called it a burden instead of a companion. Finn thought of the stories told around campfires, where old warriors spoke of their youth with both tears and smiles. Their memories had not been chains, but songs, melodies of who they once were, reminders of journeys that shaped them. Pause. Could he learn to hold his memories that way, not as weights pressing him down, but as wings guiding his steps forward? He closed his eyes, and in the quiet, visions drifted back, the sound of waves on distant shores, the warmth of Jake's laughter, the courage of friends who had fought beside him. These were not gone, not entirely. They lived within him, shaping the man he had become. To deny their weight would be to deny his own shape, his own being. He realized then that memory is not meant to be escaped, but balanced, like carrying water in a vessel. Too much, and it spills. Too little, and the vessel feels empty. The night wind carried the faint scent of smoke from some far-off fire, but it mingled with the stars above and the soil beneath, binding heaven and earth into one. Finn breathed it in slowly. He knew that he could not change the past, but perhaps he could learn to walk with it. The arm he had lost was part of that memory, a story forever inscribed in his flesh. To resent it was to fight against himself. To embrace it was to step toward peace. Slowly he sat up, gazing at the horizon where the first pale hint of dawn was beginning to show. The stars grew fainter, as memories often do, yet their presence remained, hidden in the brightness of day. Memory did not vanish, merely changed form. Just as the phantom limb had taught him about presence in absence, so too did memory teach him about life within loss. The sky lightened, and with it, Finn's heart grew lighter. He felt the weight still, but it no longer crushed him. It steadied him, grounding him in a truth as old as time. We are made of what we remember, but we are not bound only to it. Pause. With this thought, he rose again, carrying the lantern of memory softly, and stepped into the path that led deeper into himself. The river spoke in murmurs as it passed over stone and root. Its waters carried reflections of moonlight, breaking them into fragments that shimmered and vanished. Finn knelt by its edge, watching the surface shift, and felt the gentle tug of longing deep within him. Pause. For in the flowing current, he glimpsed something both familiar and impossible, the image of himself whole again, 2 arms extended, both hands reaching freely. This was the dream of wholeness, the quiet yearning for what once was, the ache to be restored. All who suffer loss know this dream. It comes unbidden like the scent of a forgotten flower or the echo of a half-remembered song. For Finn, it arrived whenever he touched water, whenever he gazed into mirrors, whenever he closed his eyes. His heart carried the shape of himself as he had been, and it whispered to him, "Return, be complete again." But what is wholeness? Is it simply the absence of loss, the restoration of what has been taken? Or is it something deeper, a harmony of being that cannot be measured by limbs or scars? The river seemed to ask this question as it flowed endlessly onward. Its surface broke again and again, yet beneath it the current remained unbroken. Was not the essence of the river whole, even though its face was always in pieces? Finn touched the water with his remaining hand. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection of his face. For a moment he saw not absence, but transformation. He wondered, perhaps wholeness is not about returning to the body we once had, but about learning to be fully present in the body we now inhabit. Yet even as he thought this, the longing remained deep and stubborn. To dream of wholeness was to dream of reunion with the past self, with the strength and freedom that once had been his. There was tenderness in the dream, but also danger. Pause. For the more he longed for what was gone, the more he risked turning away from what remained. He thought of heroes who spent their lives chasing what could never return, and how sorrow had hollowed them into shadows. To cling too tightly to the dream of wholeness was to forget that life, even fractured, still flowed like the river. Yet to deny the dream entirely felt cruel, as though asking the heart to stop breathing. Perhaps then the dream was not meant to be fulfilled but cherished, like a song sung softly in the night. It reminded him that he was more than flesh and bone, that his spirit remembered its fullness even when the body bore absence. To dream of wholeness was to keep alive the memory of balance, the vision of harmony. It was not a command to return to the past, but a reminder that something within still longed for unity. The forest listened as Finn lingered by the water. Crickets stitched their quiet chorus into the dark, and the scent of wet earth rose like incense. He realized that wholeness might be like the night sky, never entirely visible, for clouds and shadows often obscured it, yet always present behind the veil. His missing arm had not erased his being. It had only changed the way his being was revealed. The dream of wholeness, then, was not a lie, but a compass, pointing him inward, urging him to find a deeper kind of completion. Finn closed his eyes, letting the sound of water steady him. He imagined himself whole again, not in body, but in spirit, balanced, strong, tender, unafraid. He felt the phantom limbs stir, not with ache, but with calm presence, as though whispering that it too was part of him still. The dream was no longer torment, but invitation. Wholeness was not something to be regained. It was something to be lived even now, even in imperfection. The river carried on, uncaring of loss or gain, its journey eternal. Finn rose slowly, letting the dream settle into his heart. He would carry it with him, not as a burden, but as a star, something distant, yet guiding. Pause. And as he stepped away from the water's edge, he felt a quiet certainty. The dream of wholeness had not come to bind him to what was lost, but to remind him of the endless flow still waiting within. The cave was silent, but alive. Its walls glistened faintly with veins of crystal, and the air smelled of stone and still water. Finn stepped cautiously into its depths, carrying only the faint glow of a lantern. Each flicker of light revealed shadows that bent and stretched along the walls, figures that seemed to follow him with quiet patience. Pause. And in those shadows he began to see himself, not as he was, but as he feared he might become. The mirror of shadows is not made of glass. It does not reflect the face but the heart. Wherever light meets darkness, it forms an image, and in that image lies truth. Finn paused before a pool of black water, its surface unbroken, and in it a reflection appeared. Not whole, not strong, but fractured, his missing arm stark against the shimmering void. Yet the reflection seemed to breathe, as though it were alive, as though the cave itself was holding up a mirror to his soul. He felt unease stir within him. Shadows reveal what we wish to avoid. They show not the dreams of wholeness, but the fractures we try to hide. Was he afraid, then, of being seen incomplete? Did he carry shame for what he had lost? Or was it something deeper, the fear that he was no longer the hero he once believed himself to be? The lantern hissed softly, and the reflection shifted. He saw not only absence, but anger, bitterness at the unfairness of loss. He saw loneliness too, the quiet hollow where companionship had once been constant. The shadow whispered questions he had never dared ask aloud. Who are you without your strength? Who are you without your arm? Without your past? The silence of the cave seemed to wait for an answer. Finn trembled, though not from cold. He realized the mirror of shadows did not judge him. It only revealed what already lived within. The reflections were not punishments, but invitations, summons to acknowledge the darker threads of his being. For wholeness was not about ignoring shadow, but about embracing it. Just as day requires night to exist, so too does courage require fear, and tenderness requires sorrow. Without shadow, light itself cannot be known. Pause. He knelt by the pool, lowering his gaze. His reflection shifted once more. Now he saw both boy and man, the child who had once raced into danger with reckless joy, and the older self who now hesitated, who now carried the weight of scars. The two looked back at him, not in opposition, but in conversation. He understood then that his shadows were not enemies, but parts of himself waiting to be heard. The cave grew warmer, as though his acceptance softened the air. He spoke softly into the stillness, words carried by the drip of distant water. I am more than what I have lost. I am also what I have endured, and even in shadow I remain. The reflection did not vanish, but it steadied. Its edges grew less jagged, its form less threatening. The mirror of shadows had shown its lesson. Only by acknowledging darkness can we step fully into light. Finn lifted the lantern higher, and the shadows stretched once again, no longer ominous, but almost protective. He thought of the countless myths where heroes wrestled not only dragons but also themselves. Perhaps the truest battle was always inward against the fear that our brokenness makes us unworthy. The mirror of shadows reminded him that brokenness itself was a kind of truth, and truths, even painful ones, are the soil where strength grows. The cave whispered with echoes as Finn turned back toward the entrance. His steps were slower now, not from doubt, but from reverence. Each shadow that passed over him felt less like a haunting and more like a companion. He knew they would walk with him always, unseen yet inseparable. But instead of burden, he felt balance. For without shadow, he would not know the depth of his own light. The night air met him as he stepped out, cool and fresh against his skin. Above, the stars shimmered, and behind him, the cave sighed like a teacher who had spoken its lesson. Pause. Finn carried the mirror of shadows within him now, not as fear, but as understanding. He walked onward into the night, knowing the path ahead would not always be bright, but that even in darkness, he would not be lost. The meadow stretched wide beneath the twilight sky, its grasses swaying like a sea of green. Wildflowers bent with the rhythm of the wind, releasing fragrances of honey and earth. Finn stood at its center, his sword sheathed, his shoulders unburdened. For once, there was no enemy lurking in shadow, no task demanding his strength, only silence, vast and unbroken. Pause. And in that silence, he began to notice the hidden spaces between battles, the pauses that so often went unseen. For a long time, Finn had measured life by struggle. Each monster defeated, each quest completed, each scar earned. These had been his calendar, his measure of worth. Yet now, without conflict pressing upon him, he felt disoriented, almost restless. Who was he without the clash of steel, without the call to arms? The silence seemed to ask him, is your value found only in action or also in stillness? He sank into the grass, its cool blades brushing against his skin. Above, the sky deepened into shades of indigo, and the first stars trembled into view. The silence was not empty, he realized, but filled with subtle music, the drone of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the quiet rhythm of his own breath. The spaces between battles were not voids. They were sanctuaries. They offered the soul time to listen, to mend, to grow. And yet, silence can be difficult. It holds a mirror to the self, asking questions that noise and chaos often drown out. In stillness, Finn felt the ache of his missing arm more acutely. Without distraction, he could not escape the tender weight of memory. But perhaps that was the gift. Silence allowed him to meet his wounds honestly, without pretense. It was not punishment, but invitation to sit with himself unguarded, unarmed. He thought of the forest creatures who moved with quiet purpose. Deer who grazed in calm, foxes who padded softly through undergrowth. They did not fight unless pressed, yet their existence was whole. Did they not also live lives of meaning, woven not from constant battle but from the rhythm of simple being? Could he too learn that lesson, to value not only his victories but also his stillness? Pause, the stars thickened, painting the sky with patterns older than kingdoms. He recalled how ancient sages spoke of constellations as stories written by silence itself, tales passed down not through clamour, but through patient watching. Perhaps wisdom was not always found in the sword's clash, but in the quiet hours when nothing demanded urgency. Silence had its own voice, if only one dared to listen. As he lay back against the earth, Finn noticed how his heartbeat slowed, sinking with the land around him. The meadow seemed to breathe with him, a shared rhythm of life. He thought of past battles, of the rush of adrenaline, of the fierce joy of victory, but also of the exhaustion that followed. In those moments after, silence always came, often unnoticed, yet deeply necessary. Without it, no warrior could rise again. The silence between battles was more than rest. It was where meaning settled. Victories shouted loudly in the moment, but it was in the quiet afterward that their lessons took root. It was in the pause that one remembered why the fight mattered at all. To ignore these pauses was to live half a life, forever rushing from one clash to the next, without tasting the fullness of existence. Finn closed his eyes, surrendering to the hush. He felt the phantom limb once again, but now, in the stillness, its ache softened. Perhaps silence was the balm it needed, not distraction, not denial, but presence. The meadow did not ask him to fight, to prove, to conquer. It simply asked him to be. And in that being, he felt a strange kind of wholeness, one that battles alone could never grant. The night deepened, the air cooling gently against his skin. He rose slowly, carrying with him the lesson of the meadow, that silence is not absence, but fullness in disguise. Pause. He walked onward, no longer restless, but calm, ready to meet whatever came, not because he sought battle, but because he had learned the strength hidden in its pauses. The moon hung low above the horizon, casting a pale silver glow across the land. Finn walked beneath its light, each step pressing softly into the soil. The path wound through rolling hills that seemed to whisper old secrets, as though the earth itself remembered the footsteps of heroes who came before. Pause. In the stillness of night, Finn felt the invisible thread of destiny tugging gently at him, neither harsh nor heavy, but persistent, like the pull of the tide upon the shore. Destiny. The word shimmered in his thoughts, vast and ungraspable. All his life it had been spoken around him, as though he were part of some grand tapestry woven long before his birth. But was destiny a chain binding him to one course? Or was it a river flowing freely, inviting him to step in? Finn did not know. Yet as he traced the sky with his eyes, he wondered whether the stars above were guides or merely distant fires. Shining without purpose, he thought of his lost arm. The moment it was severed, the pain and the silence that followed. Some whispered it was fated, written into his story as surely as sunrise. Others said it was merely accident, the chaos of battle leaving its mark. But what did Finn believe? Was destiny the reason for his loss, or was it his choice, what he made of that loss, that gave it meaning? As he pondered, he came upon a great stone, half buried in the earth, carved with runes so ancient they had faded nearly to nothing. He ran his hand across the weathered surface, feeling grooves like veins beneath his fingertips. These marks were someone's story once, etched in permanence, declaring that their deeds had mattered. But time had worn them down. Even destiny, it seemed, was not immune to silence, to forgetting. And so Finn asked himself, if destiny fades from memory, is it still destiny? If the world forgets the battles, the scars, the triumphs, do they lose their weight? Or does their meaning live on in the soul that bore them, invisible yet eternal? He remembered the voices of mentors who had spoken of chosen ones, of fates sealed by prophecy. Yet Finn had never felt chosen. He felt human. Flawed, wounded, striving. Could it be that destiny was not a crown given from above, but something shaped in each moment, with each breath? Perhaps destiny was not a single path, but the courage to walk whichever path unfolded before him. Pause. The hills opened into a valley where a river wound its silver body beneath the moonlight. Finn knelt at its edge, gazing into the rippling surface. His reflection stared back, fragmented by water's movement, one face, yet many. He saw the boy he once was, the warrior he had become, and the man he was still learning to be. Each version shimmered briefly, then vanished into ripples. He thought, perhaps destiny is like this river, always moving, always changing shape, yet still itself. He cupped the water in his hand, feeling its coolness seep into his skin. It slipped away no matter how tightly he held it. Was destiny like that too, something glimpsed but never grasped, flowing beyond our control? And yet, though he could not hold it, the river refreshed him, nourished him. So too might destiny nourish, not by control, but by guidance. Finn stood again, the valley quiet around him. He realized the weight of destiny was not a burden pressing down, but a reminder pressing inward. It asked him to live with intention, to see each choice not as small, but as part of a larger weaving. Whether or not the stars had written his story, whether or not the gods had drawn his path, he still held the power to shape how he walked it. The weight of destiny was not heaviness, but awareness. The moon climbed higher, silvering the land, and Finn continued his journey. He did not walk faster or slower, but with steadier steps, as though the earth itself carried him forward. Pause. For he understood that destiny was not about reaching a final place, but about walking fully awake along the way. And in that gentle realization, he felt a lightness within him, as though the very weight of destiny had become a pair of wings. A mist rolled across the valley, soft and luminous like breath rising from the earth. Finn followed the silver ribbon of the river until it curved toward a grove. There, hidden among the shadows, he found a tree unlike any he had ever seen. Its trunk was vast, roots burrowed deep into the soil like veins of ancient memory. But what drew his gaze most was not its size, nor its age. It was the way its branches reached high into the sky, cradling stars as though they were fruit. Each shimmered softly, glowing with gentle warmth. Pause. The star tree, he thought. He approached, each step careful, as though not to disturb a sacred dream. The air beneath its canopy shimmered faintly, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers, sweet yet mysterious. The stars that hung in its branches pulsed lightly, like heartbeats. One flickered brighter as Finn drew near, as though recognizing him. Was this tree part of his world, or part of his dreaming? Finn could not tell, but perhaps it did not matter. Dreams often revealed truths that waking eyes ignored. He reached out his hand, his remaining hand, and felt a glow rest upon his skin. It was neither hot nor cold, but something in between, like the gentle touch of memory itself. In that glow, he felt visions stir within him. He saw his journeys flash by, the faces of friends, the laughter, the losses. He saw the moment his arm was taken, and how his spirit endured. The star pulsed, and he wondered, are these stars the stories of lives caught and held gently by the branches of time? If so, then perhaps each person was a star fruit, glowing briefly, shining, then drifting back into the soil of eternity. The star tree whispered in silence, though no words left its branches. Its message was clear. Life is not a line, but a circle. The branches grew ever outward, yet the roots reached ever inward. What was lost above nourished what was below. Finn's arm, his pain, his struggles, they were not vanishing wounds, but roots feeding his spirit. Out of loss, new strength would grow. Finn sat at the base of the trunk, leaning against its rough bark. He closed his eyes, and behind his lids he saw constellations forming, patterns that told stories of balance, of light born out of shadow, of endings that carried beginnings inside them. He asked himself, what is my star? What story do I offer to the tree? Was it the story of a boy who fought without fear, or of a man who learned to pause, to listen, to heal? The question lingered. The star in his hand dimmed gently, then rose back into the tree's canopy, joining the others in quiet brilliance. Finn felt neither sadness nor triumph, only calm. Not every star burned forever, yet every star mattered in the great pattern. He thought then of the people he loved. Jake's laughter, Marceline's music, Princess Bubblegum's endless curiosity. Each was a star, too, glowing in their own rhythm. The tree did not demand them to shine the same. Each was unique, yet together they formed constellations of meaning. Perhaps this was destiny's true shape, not a single path, but a gathering of lights, each adding to the story of the whole. Pause. As he opened his eyes, Finn noticed the mist around the grove beginning to part. Dawn's earliest light touched the edges of the horizon, and the stars in the branches began to fade gently, not extinguished, but folded back into the day. The tree itself seemed to grow quiet, as though closing its dream. He realized he had been allowed only a glimpse, a reminder that the world is layered with mysteries that reveal themselves only to those who pause and look. Finn rose slowly, placing his palm on the trunk in gratitude. He whispered no words, for none were needed. The dream of the star tree was not meant to be explained, but carried within, like a secret light to guide his steps. The path awaited beyond the grove. As Finn walked away, the air felt lighter, as though some burden had lifted from his chest. Pause. The star tree faded behind him, its branches still shimmering faintly in memory. He did not know when or if he would find it again, but he knew its lesson would remain. Every soul is a star in the great canopy, shining not alone, but together, weaving the endless dream of life. The road narrowed as Finn entered a woodland where shadows gathered thick among the trees. The canopy overhead blocked much of the sky, and the air was heavy with damp earth and moss. Each step echoed softly, as though the forest itself held its breath. Pause. Here, memories seemed to linger, not just his own, but the weight of countless lives etched invisibly into the roots and stones. Finn felt them stir as he walked. Not voices, not visions, but presences, faint and sorrowful. They clung like mist, brushing against his skin, tugging at the corners of his mind. For a moment he almost turned back, yet something within urged him onward. He knew these shadows were not enemies. They were fragments of memory, and memory could not be escaped forever. The deeper he went, the stronger they grew. Faces flickered at the edge of sight, friends gone, foes defeated, choices made that could not be undone. He saw his younger self, bright-eyed, reckless, certain that the world was simple. He saw the boy's laughter, but also his tears. And then always he saw the moment of loss, his arms severed, his strength diminished. That wound had left a shadow across his life, one that returned now to stand before him. But were shadows to be feared? He wondered. Or were they simply proof of light? Without light there could be no shadow. Perhaps memory's pain was not punishment but testimony that what was lived mattered. Finn paused at a fallen tree, sitting upon its mossy surface. He closed his eyes, letting the shadows surround him fully. They whispered not in words but in sensations, warmth of laughter, sharp sting of regret, bitter sweet fragrance of love remembered. He felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from the tenderness of carrying so much within one heart. Why do we fear memory's shadows? Is it because they remind us of what cannot return? Or is it because they demand that we carry responsibility for our choices? Finn realized that shadows are not chains, but guides. They show where the light has been, and where it might yet fall again. He recalled a story told once by Marceline of how music, even when it ended, left an echo that shaped the silence after. Shadows of memory were like that echo, not the song itself, but proof that the song had been sung. And perhaps, if one listened closely, the echo could become music again. As he opened his eyes, he saw a pool of water nestled between tree roots, still and dark. When he gazed into it, his reflection shifted. At first, he saw himself as he was, older, scarred, incomplete. Then the ripples reshaped him into the boy he had been, whole, unmarked by loss. Another ripple showed a version even older than now, his face lined, his body weary. 3 selves in one reflection. Which was real? Which was memory? Which was possibility? The pool gave no answer, but Finn felt one forming within. All of them were real, all of them true. Memory's shadow was not to erase the past nor deny the future, but to weave them together. He was not only the boy, nor only the man, he was the bridge between them. The forest grew darker as night deepened. Yet in that darkness, Finn found a strange peace. Shadows were not enemies, they were companions. Each memory, even painful, was a step that carried him here. To reject them would be to reject himself. To accept them was to grow whole. He rose, leaving the pool behind. The shadows still walked with him, but no longer as burdens. They moved more gently now, like guardians. Perhaps that was their true nature, to remind him that he was never alone. Within every loss, within every scar, lived the memory of what had been loved, fought for, endured. And such memory, even shadowed, was sacred. The trees began to thin, and faint starlight returned. Finn breathed deeply, the air clearer now as though the forest had released him. Pause. He stepped out from the shadows with steady steps, carrying them not as weights, but as lanterns, dim yet guiding, leading him onward to whatever lay ahead. The night began to soften. The last threads of darkness unraveled at the horizon, and the sky blushed with the first hues of dawn, roses and gold spilling gently across the world. Finn stood upon a hilltop, his journey through silence, destiny, dreams and shadows now carrying him to this quiet threshold of morning. Pause. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of dew-soaked grass, and the birds stirred softly, their voices not yet a chorus, but a promise. He felt the weight of the night behind him, the meadow of stillness, the valley of destiny, the grove of stars, the forest of memory. Each place had left its imprint upon him, just as surely as the battles and scars of his past. And yet, as dawn light touched his skin, he sensed that all those fragments were converging, weaving into a wholeness he had not felt before. There was no enemy to strike, no quest to chase, only the slow rising of the sun and the quiet realization that he was still here, still alive. His missing arm ached faintly, as it always did, but this time the ache felt less like emptiness and more like a reminder that loss and life could coexist, side by side, without negating each other. He thought of destiny once more, not as prophecy written in stone, but as the simple act of waking each day and choosing to walk forward. The gentle dawn showed him that destiny did not need to be grand. It could be as soft as light spilling over the earth, unnoticed yet sustaining everything it touched. Perhaps that was its truest form, quiet, constant, essential. Finn sat down upon the hill, feeling the grass damp beneath him. He watched as the sun lifted higher, its rays painting the world with slow patience. He wondered how many dawns had come before, unnoticed by those too weary to look. How many would come after, long after his story ended? The thought did not sadden him. Instead, it comforted him. Life was vast, and he was but one star in its canopy, one branch in its tree. Yet his light, however brief, added to the whole. The world awakened around him. Birds sang in full now, their notes weaving into a tapestry of sound. A breeze carried warmth across his cheek, carrying also the faint fragrance of blossoms beginning to open. He thought of Jake's laughter, of Marceline's songs, of Princess Bubblegum's endless striving. Each friend was like this dawn, a light rising in its own way, giving warmth to his journey. He reflected on his battles, the victories and the wounds. For so long he had measured himself by what he fought, by what he conquered. But dawn whispered another truth. The measure of life is not only in battles won, but in mornings welcomed. To wake, to breathe, to notice the quiet miracle of daybreak, that too was courage. That too was enough. Pause. Finn closed his eyes, letting the warmth seep into him. He imagined the star tree standing unseen beyond the hills, its branches cradling the fading stars of night. He imagined the shadows of memories still walking beside him, but gentler now, softened by the dawn's touch. He imagined silence lingering between each heartbeat, not as emptiness, but as sanctuary. All these pieces lived within him now. He was not merely a boy who lost an arm, not merely a warrior with scars. He was a vessel of light, shadow, silence and song, woven together by the simple thread of being alive. The sun rose fully, golden and unwavering. The hill glowed, the valley below shimmering as dew turned to diamonds. Finn breathed deeply, filling his chest with morning. The journey was not over, it never would be. Life was not a tale that ended neatly, but a river that flowed onward, always unfolding. He stood, stretching his body, letting the dawn crown him with light. For a moment he felt whole, not because he was unbroken, but because he accepted the beauty of his brokenness. Pause. And as he walked down the hill into the awakening world, he carried with him the gentle truth of dawn, that every ending is only another beginning, and every loss contains within it the seed of light.